So we're here at the Sustainable Innovation Zone to talk about the work that we're doing to restore the health of the world's soil. And I've been at COP26 running some events with business partners and a coalition of business partners. And in addition to that, networking and having separate side event meetings with potential collaborators and sources of funding. Soil holds more carbon than 4 times more carbon than is in the atmosphere, and so it's a very important regulator of climate. Now, that carbon in soil provides the energy source for the living part of soil. So soil is a living system. If you look in a farmer's field, there's probably more life below the soil than there is above it. Life needs energy, and the energy comes in the form of carbon. And when that carbon goes into the soil and the microbes use it, that energy gets translated into organization within the soil, and that organization gives soil all the properties that support the natural fertility of the planet. And that includes storing water, enabling air to mix with that water to support the life that's there, and then connect the water and nutrients to plants. And of course, some of those plants are the food that we grow, and some of it is nature. So soil is basically the recycling system of the planet, and the energy source for that is carbon. Now, about 40% of the world's soil is degraded. That means that it's lost a lot of its carbon, it's lost its energy, and the consequences of that are it doesn't hold on to water as well. It also emits more greenhouse gas than a healthy soil, and it's not as productive or resilient in terms of producing food. What we want to do is work with some of the world's biggest companies that work with farmers and and to help restore the world's soil. So in our consortium, we've got corporates like BASF and Bayer and UPL that together probably reach 60% of the world's farmers and maybe 70% of the farmed surface of the earth. That means we can immediately deliver at scale and quickly if we can find the way of pulling together the other partners that we need, and particularly how we finance that transition, because it needs a bit of finance in order to transition agriculture from where it is and create the right kind of investment to move it to where it needs to be. And so we're working with the finance sector, we're working with hard to abate sectors who need some short-term offsets to join up all of that and create a kind of an ecosystem, a solution ecosystem that can accelerate the restoration of soil health and therefore address food security, water insecurity, and biodiversity, because the biggest factor in the decline of biodiversity is the conversion of wild land to agricultural land. And if you maintain and improve the health of the soil, you don't need more land. The major challenges that we've identified working with corporates, with NGOs and talking to farmers is first of all the science. Bizarrely, we don't really understand how soil works. We know enough to get started, but we need to get better. So for that reason, we've created a global scientific committee. So the world's leading experts and movers and shakers in the soil community, the scientists, coming together to help us build a consensus of what's the best knowledge that we have at the moment and how can we apply that knowledge, whilst at the same time co-creating new knowledge with farmers. So farmers are our partners in this. Their business is like doing a global experiment. They have a living laboratory, and when they farm, they're doing experiments. We can learn from what farmers do, and then hopefully we can synthesize that, and they can learn from the scientists how to do things better. So we're creating this kind of creative ecosystem in partnership with the farmers. The second challenge relates to this carbon story. Now, one of the ways to incentivize farmers to get carbon into the soil is to pay them. Now we know that if farmers treat their soil well, they will pull down a significant amount of carbon. There's the potential to pull down around 2 gigatons of carbon CO2 equivalent per year, which is about the minimum required offset that we need to meet the Paris Agreement. So that's not to say it gives an excuse for companies not to decarbonize, but even if the most optimistic scenario of how quickly we can reduce emissions from our existing activities, we still need at least 2 gigatons of carbon to be removed from the atmosphere. And what better place to put it than in soil where it has so many co-benefits? But the challenge to that is we need methods of measuring that soil carbon at scale. And currently it's quite expensive to do that, which means there's less money available to incentivize farmers. So we need to find ways that we can measure and verify that carbon that allows farmers to register their carbon in soil as an offset and get paid for it. So scalability is a big issue. The final main challenge is to do with permanence. So the usual narrative around permanence is that for offsetting, you need to lock carbon up in nature for about 100 years. And this, I think, emerged from the dialogue around using forests and trees to lock up carbon. It's about roughly the average age of a tree. So 100 years is a kind of random number, right? And if we're genuinely moving in a direction of zero emissions, we won't need offsets. And so the question is, how long do we need an offset? So there's a bit of a dialogue around that. You can lose carbon from soil very easily. Through nothing to do with the farmer, climate events like a drought, for example, and we expect more and more drought. So soils will lose that carbon. So we need a way to de-risk that from the investment point of view and from the farmer point of view. One way to do that is by operating at a global scale. You can pool that risk, and then working with the financial sector, you can insure against it. So we want to lift the risk away from the farmer and enable a sensible risk management approach. We're desperate to get stuff starting on the ground. We genuinely believe that we've got 5 years actually to turn this story around. And 5 years in the life of soil is actually quite short. To get carbon into soil, we need to start now, right? So the exciting bit that we're going to be doing in the innovation zone over the next few days is to talk to investors and understand how, well, in fact, we'll be making an announcement. We've received our first slug of investment. And that will allow us to start a dialogue with the investment community more broadly. How do we increase that level of investment? We reckon we need about 10 billion a year. That money is there, but soil is still perceived as quite a risky investment. So we need to mix that private source of finance with public and philanthropic sources of finance to build a pathway of delivery and impact that de-risks soil for future investment by the private sector to increase the returns from the private sector and make it a more attractive investment opportunity for the whole sector. So we're working very closely with PwC, for example, who are participating in the Climate Champions, high-level Climate Champions team, to figure out how finance sector can work with nature-based solutions to drive impact. So we're getting started right away. And we're going to co-create this roadmap with the investment community so that we can, as quickly as possible, de-risk the investment opportunity and let them all crowd in and get this done.